Also in tonight's programme, fighting for their hospital. Dame Vera Lynn and 50,000 petitioners who fear changes at Haywards Heath Hospital could risk lives. And we meet the adventurers who've paid £23,000 each to race around the world.
Well, I'm standing in the main street of a small residential area in the heart of Lewes, one of the worst towns affected over the last 48 hours in these floods. But you can see quite clearly behind me the ambulance and obviously the houses on the right. Let me give you some idea of where that water was. It was at the very top on the roof of the ambulance, which meant that it was going up well to the ground floor windows. Now, fortunately, as you can see, obviously, the floods are receding. The water is going back. The Environment Agency and the fire services have later on this afternoon begun to pump the affected areas, to pump the water away from those areas. Chris Ware has been to the town centre of Lewes and he's found out just what the damage has been done.
One flood, one business, a £1 million mess. Hundreds of homes and businesses started today like this, saturated in water, oil and worse. Time for a stiff upper lip.
Not good. We're under about 8 feet of water at the moment. It's been up to about 10 feet. So business at the moment is, we don't know when we're going to get back to it.
Wrecked today, Safeways plans to open tomorrow outside. 2 metal containers will specialise in bread, milk, medicine and bleach. Tesco stayed dry, but is still cut off and has lost hundreds of thousands of pounds in defrozen food. During the night, all the people in Lewes wanted was for the water to go away. This morning it's beginning to go down, but we're finding below the surface the true cost of what's happened. There's a stench of diesel fuel across the town, and the roads lie littered with fuel cans and even sewage. Overnight, the damage could only be guessed at as people bedded down in emergency shelters.
There's so much. My furniture was just nearly touching the, well, it was up, it got up here, and my husband said, if you slip, you'll drown.
High water came at 1 a.m. as the rescues continued. Then, at last, very slowly, the water began to subside. The highest point of the flood was just here. During the day, the water has slowly moved out, and we're now approaching low tide. The good news is that the low water mark is here. The bad news is that the river still lies over there. Last night may yet turn out to have cost £4 billion worth of damage. Britain's costliest ever natural disaster. Chris Ware, BBC South Today at Lewes.
You know, it's hard to imagine what the inside of many of these homes is like. Just around the corner is the home of Gordon and Claire Baker. That's literally just to the right of that ambulance. They got married just a few months ago. They were decorating their house when this happened. They let me join them when they returned home for the very first time.
I know home ruined like that.
Oh, it sounds horrible. I really didn't expect the furniture to have moved itself, actually. I was expecting the furniture to be reasonably where we left it. But this is just as mad. This is crazy.
Quite strange, isn't it? Yeah, you work hard and you put your money together and get somewhere nice and can't do anything about this, can you?
You okay? Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Well, you haven't got loads of money. You do it bit by bit and you add pieces here and there. And insurance will never recover that sort of thing, you know? All you can do is build it up again from scratch.
I felt sick all day, physically sick. And now, I don't know really, now I've seen it. So where to start?
Claire and Graham Baker, who are facing what many will face over the coming few days. Now, just up the road is Uckfield, one of the first towns that were badly affected. Who can forget that water running through the main street, 5 foot 6 feet deep? Businesses have been badly affected. The mopping up process has begun. Caroline Richardson was there.
Uckfield High Street today. It doesn't look any different from normal, does it? But yesterday was quite a different matter. The whole town was a torrent. The water here is 7 feet high, and underneath it was Sylvia Jenner's newsagents.
And I just literally stood along the road and watched everything of mine disappearing through this window that had smashed, and everything was floating by.
It's heartbreaking. Sylvia took delivery of her Christmas stock only yesterday, and she's worried the insurance won't cover it.
That's the bit that we're worried about, because we are a small family business, and whether we can afford it or not to continue is entirely up to what we find is the sum of the end of the day.
But the flood didn't discriminate. It raged through small family businesses and national corporations, leaving dedicated staff to wade through the silt and sewerage.
The nappies, the disposable nappies, I didn't realise. I thought they were sandbags. They'd all fallen off. They were awful.
Huge craters had appeared in the pavements, but just as quickly the workmen arrived. The push to return to normal has given the town a sense of focus.
All of the boys are out with the wagons at the moment, cleaning up the debris. And after that, we have to have environmental health people around to look for pollution.
It'll be weeks before a final figure can be put on the damage, but many will struggle to make it through the next few days. Caroline Richardson, BBC South Today in Uckfield.
The figures that have been talked about this afternoon are in the region of £4 billion. That's the cost of the damage over the last few days. And that is likely to rise as well as people put in their insurances, obviously for the houses and contents, as well as businesses. We'll have more later in the programme, but now let's join Roger for other news of the day.
Thanks, Sally. Part of the Queen Alexandra Hospital in Cosham was evacuated this afternoon after a chemical spillage. The hospital floods of the last 2 days in Sussex have left a trail of devastation. Sally is in Lewes, the worst affected area in Sussex. Sally.
Thank you, Roger. I'm in Lewes, as you say. Behind me, they are the playing fields and indeed a playground over here, which have been completely submerged for the last 24 hours. But one group of people we haven't mentioned already this evening are the farmers. They are certainly evaluating the effects of this flood and, of course, the damage that they face. They've spent much of the last 24 hours rescuing their stock and surveying the damage of crops. Some herds were stranded, and of course there were some cattle that were washed into towns and cities. In fact, the RSPCA says it may consider prosecuting some owners. Here's our environment correspondent, Jay Andrews.
The floods had receded, but not Martin Tebbett's concerns. His whole potato crop could be damaged, and other colleagues had done worse.
I've heard of thousands of chickens being drowned. I've heard of cattle being swept away. I've heard of people lucky to escape with their lives. So we've been fortunate, really. I'm not saying it's not disastrous, but there's other people worse off.
There's also been a potentially disastrous delay to winter crops. Overall, the Farmers' Union says millions of pounds may have been lost. This herd at least was safe. Among those helping rescue stranded herds was the RSPCA.
As we were coming up the river towards them, there were the odd stray one, and all you could see above the water was the nostrils, and you could just about see the water breaking behind them. We were able to lasso those, hold them alongside with their head out of the water and drag them back.
The RSPCA warned it might prosecute some farmers for not moving their animals to safety in time. That angers farmers like Richard Monington.
Well, I did everything I could within my power, phoned up MAF, the NFU, the local vets, fire brigade, police, everybody in an effort to try and save these animals once they were in that situation. But we were obviously devastated by it.
Today, most farmers and their livestock were recovering, but for some farmers, the floods and the aftermath have left a sour taste. They're going to get out of farming before the next floods happen. Jay Andrews, BBC South Today, East Sussex.
Peter Midgley from the Environment Agency is here with me. What about the development on the floodplain? Some people have criticised that, saying it should never have happened.
Certainly development has been a factor in the flooding in some places. But what we've got to do first is to look at how we can best protect better those properties which have been flooded over the last few days and lie in the floodplain. Then, more importantly, we've got to look to the future and ensure that flood development is kept well away from the floodplain. We don't want to build up problems for the future. We don't want more people's lives and businesses destroyed.
Thank you very much, Peter Midgley. Dr. Graham Bickler is here with me, Director of Public Health with Sussex Health Authority. When people return to their homes, what are the do's and don'ts that they should think about?
Well, I think the first thing is that people shouldn't return to their homes until they're safe. That is, until the gas, electricity and structural issues have been sorted out. When they do, the important thing to remember is that floodwater has been contaminated with sewage, diesel, maybe other contaminants. So it should be treated with great care. Wear rubber gloves, use plenty of water, detergent to clean things out. And although tap water is safe to drink, the tap water supply hasn't been contaminated. The taps may have been. So clean them thoroughly, allow the water to run for a quarter of an hour before using any tap water for drinking.
Dr. Graham Bickler, thank you very much. And obviously there will be help on local radio stations, which people will be giving out over the next few days. And finally with me is Cheryl Miller, who's the Chief Executive of East Sussex County Council. If you like, more globally, if you like, than as an individual, you've got roads, schools, highways to look after. What's your immediate priority?
Well, the immediate priority is to look after the people who we've had to evacuate into the homes and make sure that we can return life to normality for them as quickly as possible. But having said that, then we're in the business now already of actually repairing the roads. We're looking at the bridges as well. One or two of the bridges, we've had to get structural engineers out to check that they're safe.
Who's paying for this?
Well, clearly the insurance industry is going to have to bear a lot of the cost and premiums will go up. But as far as public expenditure is concerned, the Minister did suggest this morning that given the scale of the disaster, and provided the rules are followed, that central government would help us out. The difficulty is that under the rules, we have first to spend in excess of £750,000 of East Sussex residents' money before we can even turn to the government for help. Once we turn to them, there's no guarantee then that they will give it to us. And if they do, it will only be partial. So I suspect most of the money will actually have to be diverted from other services.
Cheryl Miller, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this evening. More from us in a moment, but now let me hand you back to Roger in the studio.
Thanks, Sally, and let's move on to sport now. And
that floodline number again, 0845 988 1188. But it is going to get drier as we move through tomorrow. That's the forecast. Bye for now.
Scientists investigating a remote island off Africa predict it may soon cause the greatest human disaster.
Good afternoon. They're the worst floods for years. Parts of east and west Sussex knee-deep in water as the emergency services battle to save homes and lives. Hundreds of jobs at risk in Southampton, but joy for Portsmouth as Vosper confirms it is to move. And Pompey's Pulis is out and Claridge is in, for the next 4 months at least. It's been the heaviest rain for decades. Much of East Sussex is underwater. Uckfield is the worst hit, whilst other villages are cut off. Roads are impassable and homes have been evacuated. Every single fire appliance in East Sussex is on the streets, desperately pumping out affected homes. Now, with more rain predicted, there are fears the situation will get worse. Ian Lachlan has this report.
The day a town disappeared, the rains burst the Ucks riverbank, flooded streets and homes, and engulfed all in its wake. One man stepped out of his local supermarket and was swept away into the icy torrent. He was found 20 minutes later in the River Up and pulled to safety.
We ran out into the back garden to see this bloke standing on the riverbank, obviously dragged himself out of the river. He wasn't with it. He was just standing going, help me, help me. Cold. Very, very cold.
People gathered at the edge of what was once their high street. They couldn't believe what had happened.
The cars floating down the outer roads that are blocking the middle of the road, so you can't get passable. The whole rivers are burst everywhere.
Emergency services were at full stretch as the crisis spread to other rivers across the county. This boat was on its way to rescue a woman downriver, trapped in her own home.
They are not in imminent danger, but they are trapped in the. We believe that it's an elderly lady who can't get out of her house at the moment.
It'll take months to estimate the financial damage to the area, but the toll of human misery is clear. Homes filled with mud and water, distress and frustration. East Sussex has endured 4 inches of rainfall in just 24 hours. But with another 1.5 inches forecast, there could be worse to come. Ian Loughlin, BBC South.
I'm proud of you, kid. Very good. Now look, tie him up, and I'll have a couple of orderlies come by with a straitjacket. Very good. I'm proud of you, boys. I never saw anything. Hey, how many people has he killed? Don't be morbid. Just tie him up until the boys in the white jackets get